She stepped into the dealership, her worn jeans and plain white t-shirt starkly contrasting the gleaming luxury vehicles on display. With quiet confidence, she approached the sales desk, inquiring about a high-end car. The salesman barely concealed his disdain as his eyes swept over her casual attire. "I'm sorry, but I think you're in the wrong place," he sneered, gesturing toward the exit. "These vehicles start at $300,000. Laughter rippled through the showroom as other staff members exchanged knowing glances. Customers turned to stare, some smirking at the humiliating spectacle. Heat rushed to her cheeks, but she refused to let them see her falter. Without a word, she turned and walked away. The next morning, the dealership's pristine glass walls reflected the sunlight as a sleek Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled to a stop at the entrance. The back door swung open, and as the familiar figure stepped out, the smug salesman's smirk vanished, his jaw dropping in stunned silence. He never saw it coming. Boston Luxury Motors stood like a temple of opulence, its glass walls revealing a dreamlike fleet of exotic automobiles. Porsche, Bentley, Aston Martin, Ferrari, each a masterpiece of engineering and prestige. Maggie Collins strode through the entrance, her brown ponytail bouncing slightly, her face calm but purposeful. She carried herself with the quiet self-assurance of a woman who knew exactly who she was. Her t-shirt was simple, her jeans well-worn, and her makeup minimal. Practicality had always been her preference over presentation. What no one could see at first glance was the empire she had built. The Collins Foundation for Children with Disabilities, an organization that had touched and transformed thousands of lives. Before she had met her now husband, she had poured every ounce of her heart, her education in special needs development, and her relentless drive into that foundation. Her eyes immediately landed on a striking midnight blue coupe, perched elegantly on an elevated display. A perfect gift for her sister's upcoming 40th birthday. Caroline had battled breast cancer and won. After everything she had endured, Maggie wanted to give her something that whispered, "You made it. You deserve this." She had more than enough wealth to afford it, but wealth wasn't what defined her. Across the room, Blake Thompson, the sales manager, adjusted his crisp blue tie, smoothing his navy suit with the precision of a man who prided himself on reading people at a glance. One look at Maggie and he made his judgment. This was going to be entertaining. "Good morning," Maggie greeted as a young salesman. Daniel approached her with an eager smile. "Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors. I'm Daniel. Is there a specific model you're interested in?" Before she could respond, a smooth voice cut in. "I'll handle this, Daniel." Blake stepped forward, his smile carefully rehearsed, his eyes void of genuine warmth. "Are you lost, ma'am?" he asked, amusement flickering in his gaze. Maggie maintained her pleasant expression. "Actually, I'm interested in the midnight blue coupe." Blake's smirk barely wavered, though there was a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Another daydreamer, he thought. That's the limited edition Azure. Only 15 were made this year, he said, deliberately enunciating each word as if speaking to a child. "Perhaps I can direct you to our pre-owned section. It's about 3 blocks east." His eyes flicked to her sneakers, scuffed from years of comfort over fashion. Maggie recognized the scrutiny, the silent dismissal. It was a story she knew too well. She tilted her head unfazed. "I'd really love to see the interior," she said evenly. Blake's patience thinned. "The Azure is by appointment only," he lied smoothly. "Our serious clients schedule private viewings." At that moment, the glass doors swung open, and a couple dressed in designer attire entered. Blake's demeanor transformed in an instant. His back straightened, his tone brightened. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, wonderful to see you again." Maggie watched as he ushered them toward the very car he had just deemed appointment only. Daniel, standing awkwardly at her side, gave an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry about that. Would you still like to hear about the Azure?" Maggie's lips curved into a knowing smile. "That would be lovely, Daniel." Blake, in full salesman mode, opened the coupe's door with a flourish. This particular model has a waiting list of 8 months, but I've set one aside for special clients. Mrs. Harrington ran a manicured hand over the leather interior. It's exquisite, but I'm not sure about the color. We can certainly discuss custom options, Blake assured her, his voice dripping with charm. Maggie stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Excuse me, I was hoping to inquire about purchasing this model. Blake's expression soured instantly. He turned to her, irritation creeping into his voice. As I mentioned, this vehicle is being shown to these customers. Perhaps you could come back another time or, as I suggested, visit our used car section. The Harringtons shifted uncomfortably. Maggie's unwavering gaze held his. I'm specifically interested in this car. It's a gift for my sister's birthday. Blake leaned in slightly, his tone now condescending. Look, I understand people like to dream, but this is a place of business. That vehicle costs more than most homes. I've been patient, but you're interrupting a legitimate sale. Silence spread across the showroom. Customers had stopped browsing, sensing something unfolding. Daniel, looking mortified, hovered at the edge of the scene. Maggie's voice remained steady. I'm prepared to make a cash purchase today. Blake barked out a laugh, a sharp, dismissive sound. A cash purchase? Really? This isn't a flea market. People who can afford these cars don't dress like... He gestured at her clothes with open disdain. A slow burn of anger ignited in Maggie's chest, not for herself, but for every person who had ever been dismissed, belittled, underestimated. I believe my money is as good as anyone else's, she said quietly. Blake took a step closer, towering over her. Let me be clear, he said, his voice low and clipped. You are wasting my time and embarrassing yourself. Either make an appointment, dressed appropriately, or leave. The room had gone deathly quiet. And then, a new voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? Richard Mason, the dealership's owner, had entered, drawn by the commotion. His sharp gaze flicked from Maggie to Blake, assessing the situation in an instant. Blake straightened, adjusting his tie. No problem, sir. Just explaining to this lady that we operate by appointment for serious buyers. Richard turned to Maggie. Miss Collins, she said. Margaret Collins. Richard's eyes widened slightly in recognition. Blake had just made the biggest mistake of his career. The dealership's owner spoke with careful diplomacy, his voice measured as he addressed Maggie. Our clientele understands the exclusivity of our vehicles. Maggie met his gaze without flinching, though she could feel the humiliation burning beneath her skin. Oh, I understand perfectly, she said, her tone steady despite the storm raging inside her. Your sales manager has made your policies quite clear. Blake stepped forward again, his smirk unwavering, his voice laced with condescension. If you're genuinely interested, which forgive me, but I sincerely doubt, you're welcome to call and schedule an appointment. He paused, then added with deliberate cruelty, though I'd strongly advise bringing proof of funds. And perhaps dressing the part. He swept a hand around the showroom, gesturing at the gleaming luxury vehicles. These cars aren't just for anyone. They're for a certain class of people. A ripple of murmurs passed through the onlookers. Someone chuckled. Others exchanged amused glances. Maggie took in the scene. The judging faces, Blake's smug confidence, the dealership owner's silence that spoke volumes. It wasn't the first time she had faced such prejudice, but rarely had it been this blatant, this public. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. I see, she said simply, her dignity intact even as her spirit ached from the sting of their scorn. She turned without another word and strode toward the exit. As she reached the glass doors, She heard Blake's voice behind her, not quite hushed enough. Some people just don't know their place. She stepped into the crisp morning air, pulling out her phone. The embarrassment still burned, but beneath it, something else stirred, a quiet, unwavering determination. As she dialed, a small, resolute smile formed on her lips. The Collins estate sprawled over 5 serene acres just outside Boston, an oasis of understated elegance. Though it housed one of the wealthiest couples in the country, it bore none of the ostentation expected of such wealth. Alexander Collins had built his fortune in silence, revolutionizing renewable energy storage technology and reshaping an industry. At 41, he was one of the most influential visionaries in the field, yet he remained deliberately low profile, valuing purpose over prestige. When Maggie stepped into his home office, he looked up immediately, his attention shifting from his work to her face. 15 years of marriage had made him fluent in her unspoken language. One glance told him everything. Something was wrong. Setting aside his documents, he stood, crossing the room without hesitation. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Maggie exhaled, sinking into one of the leather chairs. The morning's events washed over her again, replaying in her mind like a cruel reminder. "It was educational," she said at last, her smile faint and brittle. Then she told him everything. The dismissive glances, the condescending words, the humiliation of being judged by the clothes she wore rather than the person she was. She spoke of Blake Thompson's sneering tone, the snickers from other employees, and the way the dealership's owner had done nothing to intervene. Alexander remained silent, listening intently, his expression darkening with each detail. When she finished, she sighed, running a hand through her ponytail. "It's not about me," she said finally. "I can walk away knowing the truth, that I could have bought that car 10 times over. But how many others get treated like that every day? How many people are dismissed before they even have a chance to prove themselves?" Alexander nodded slowly. This, her unwavering concern for others, even in the face of her own mistreatment, was what had always moved him most about her. "So," he said, "what do you want to do about it?" Maggie hesitated, torn between instinct and principle. "Part of me wants to do nothing," she admitted. "Just buy Caroline's gift somewhere else and move on. But then I think about Daniel, the young salesman who treated me with respect, regardless of what I was wearing. And I think about all the people who don't have the option to prove their worth beyond appearances." She met Alexander's gaze, her voice steady but laced with conviction. "They need to understand that a person's value isn't determined by the label on their clothes or the shine of their shoes. But I don't want revenge. I want awareness." Alexander studied her for a long moment, a plan already forming in his mind. Then he smiled. "I think I might have an idea, something that accomplishes both." Maggie arched a brow, knowing the way his mind worked. "Nothing too dramatic," she warned. "And no, you're not buying the dealership and firing everyone." Alexander chuckled, shaking his head. "Nothing so cliché," he assured her, "but maybe a little education is in order." Together they devised a plan, not for vengeance, but for enlightenment, not to punish, but to make people see beyond their assumptions. As the evening settled over their estate, Alexander made several phone calls, setting everything in motion. Tomorrow, a lesson in humility would unfold, a lesson Blake Thompson and the entire dealership would never forget. The following morning arrived with an air of quiet perfection. At precisely 10:17 a.m., the deep, unmistakable growl of an elite engine turned every head in Boston luxury motors. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. The showroom, once filled with idle chatter, fell silent. Outside, through the gleaming floor-to-ceiling windows, a car unlike any other glided to a stop at the dealership's entrance. Even Blake Thompson, who had grown immune to the daily presence of extravagance, felt his pulse quicken. A Rolls-Royce Phantom. But not just any Phantom. This was a custom-built extended wheelbase edition, its bespoke midnight blue finish shifting subtly in the morning light. A rare configuration worth well over $1.2 million. Is that? Someone murmured. Richard Mason, the dealership's owner, emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. The spoke Phantom, Blake confirmed, already moving toward the entrance. The uniformed chauffeur stepped out, walking with practiced elegance to the passenger side. With white-glove precision, he opened the door, and from the vehicle emerged a man who commanded attention without uttering a word. Tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly groomed, his posture effortlessly authoritative. Blake's salesman instincts kicked into overdrive. This wasn't just a potential client. This was the client, the kind whose loyalty could mean millions. He stepped forward swiftly, ensuring no one else got to him first. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors." His voice carried his signature confidence. "Blake Thompson, sales manager. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today." The man regarded him with an unreadable expression before offering a polite but distant smile. "Alexander Collins," he said simply, extending a firm handshake. Blake's mind raced. The name was familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. Regardless, the Rolls-Royce alone told him everything he needed to know. "Mr. Collins, it's truly an honor. What brings you to our showroom today? May I show you our newest arrivals? We've just received a limited edition." Alexander lifted a hand slightly, silencing him with a quiet authority. "I'm here about a specific vehicle," he said smoothly. "The Azure Coupe, midnight blue." Blake's smile widened. "An excellent choice, sir. One of only 15 produced this year. I'd be delighted to show you. It's actually right over." "I know where it is," Alexander interrupted. His voice was calm, but there was something ice-cold beneath it. "My wife was here yesterday. She expressed interest in it." Blake's smile wavered, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Your wife? I don't recall. Perhaps one of my colleagues assisted her." Alexander's expression turned to stone. "No, Mr. Thompson," he said coolly. "You assisted her, or rather, you refused to." The blood drained from Blake's face. A lesson in true worth. Daniel, the young salesman, let out an audible gasp as the weight of Alexander Collins' words settled over the showroom. Blake Thompson, usually smooth and composed, found himself floundering for an explanation. His carefully rehearsed charm had abandoned him, replaced by an uneasy stammer. "Mr. Collins, I believe there must be some misunderstanding. We welcome all customers here," he insisted, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his growing desperation. Richard Mason, the dealership's owner, had by now joined the conversation, drawn by the palpable tension in the room. He glanced between Blake's ashen face and Alexander's unwavering gaze. Sensing the storm brewing, he cleared his throat. "Is there a problem here?" Richard asked, attempting to inject authority into his voice. Alexander turned his piercing gaze toward the owner. "Mr. Mason, I presume?" "Yes, indeed," Richard nodded quickly. "Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors." Alexander didn't acknowledge the greeting. Instead, his voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the civility. "I was just explaining to your sales manager that my wife visited yesterday. She was interested in purchasing the Azure Coupe as a gift for her sister. However, she was met with unexpected hostility." A flicker of unease crossed Richard's face. I do recall a brief interaction, but I wasn't privy to all the details." Alexander's expression darkened. "The details include your sales manager making it clear that people like her do not belong here, based solely on her attire." A murmur rippled through the showroom. Salespeople, support staff, even customers had paused to watch the unfolding scene. Blake opened his mouth to protest, to salvage what little dignity remained. Mr. Collins, it wasn't a misunderstanding. A voice cut through the silence. All eyes turned to Daniel, the young salesman who had spoken up when it mattered most. I'd like you to handle all the paperwork, he said, starting with the Azure. Daniel blinked. Me? Sir, thank you. I'd be honored. Alexander nodded, satisfied. Good. Now shall we discuss the specifics of the corporate fleet? As they moved toward Richard Mason's office, Alexander trailed a hand along the Azure's polished surface. My wife, he murmured, has excellent taste, doesn't she? Behind them, Blake remained frozen in place. His perfect world, built on appearances, status, and judgment, had come crashing down. He had been exposed, not for how he treated the powerful, but for how he had treated someone he wrongly assumed was insignificant. A month later, the Collins Foundation's benefit gala was a vision of hope and resilience. The Grand Boston Hotel was alive with laughter, warmth, and purpose. Children in wheelchairs raced one another across the ballroom. Families, medical professionals, and donors shared stories and smiles. Near the entrance, Blake Thompson stood in a simple event staff uniform, a stark contrast to his usual designer suits. A month ago, this would have been beneath him. Now he understood it was exactly where he needed to be. Maggie Collins approached, dressed in a modest blue gown. Even now, knowing who she was, Blake was struck by her humility. How are you finding the experience? She asked gently. Blake considered the question. Humbling, he admitted, and necessary. Maggie nodded approvingly. Thomas seems to have taken a liking to you. Blake glanced at the young boy in the wheelchair beside him and smiled. He's teaching me adaptive basketball. Apparently, I have terrible form. Maggie laughed. He's an honest coach. Then Blake's expression grew serious. Mrs. Collins, I know I've apologized formally, but I need to say it again. To you. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you. Maggie studied him for a moment before offering a small, knowing smile. The question isn't whether you regret it, she said softly. It's what you've learned. Blake met her gaze. That worth isn't defined by money or appearance, and that respect should be given freely until a person proves they don't deserve it, not the other way around. Maggie nodded. Good lessons. Expensive ones, too. Blake thought of the fleet that Alexander had not purchased. He let out a rueful chuckle. Worth every penny, he said, and for the first time, he truly meant it.